All right, on this week's 100th episode of Whitetail Cribs, we have Jared Scheffler, the owner of the series Whitetail Adrenaline, where they go on public ground and hunt with crazy techniques and have fantastic success. You get to check out one of the largest typicals ever shot with the traditional bow in this video. And real quick, want to say thank you to everyone that has stuck with us here the last 100 episodes. Thank you to the guests. Thank you for everyone that tunes in on the live premieres every single Wednesday at noon. And thank you to the team here at Exodus for making this a success. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Jared Scheffler in Wisconsin. Here we go.
Welcome. This is the pad. I'm Jared Scheffler from Whitetail Adrenaline, and this is where I live and do all the editing for the videos. So come on in. This is the upstairs here. Got a nice little kitchen grill. If I'd have known, this is kind of short notice, otherwise I would have thawed some meat out and we'd be grilling out tonight. But I'll take you downstairs. That's where the magic kind of more or less happens. This is where I spend the majority of my time, at least this time of year. So yeah, I started Whitetail Adrenaline in 2006, 07, right in that era. For those of you that don't know much about it, it's all public land based, hunting whitetails on the ground, spot and stock, missing half of them, that kind of format, all raw and unscripted, off the fly. It's kind of chaotic, kind of a, fiasco. But anyways, this is where I do my editing right here. So this is kind of my nice clean desk right here. You get a lot done, a lot more done when you got a messy desk versus a clean one. So that's why I like to keep it messy. And then if you come in here, this is where Andy works from. And this is where I keep all the noisy machines. And then I have some unbelievable cable management coming out through here. But it gets a lot quieter out here, and I like to keep that nice and quiet. But as you can see here, great cable management. But I guess, I haven't, there's a lot of deer tucked back there. We'll start with that one real quick. This is the first actually pretty solid buck I shot. That was back in 03. And it was it was the first one that I shot that was decent size, and it was my first real video buck. And I self-filmed that one. That guy, he was 04. Not much of a story behind him other than crept into a spot and he come through and rut kind of deer. This one right here, this is actually my most recent deer. That stock's on our video that came out last year, Resurgence in Wyoming. It was a really neat spot and stock, longbow. I missed him the first shot, followed up with a second, and things kind of came together well. So that deer I shot a few years ago. I shot that one in Iowa. I got him mounted. I probably would have V-notched him or Euro'd him. I actually like V-notches, as you're gonna see here in a little bit. I got a whole mess of them. I like being able to touch them, feel them, and honestly, I wasn't, it was pretty dry making money back in them early days of the videos. Like $500 for a head mount was a lot. So I got a lot of V-notches and Euros back there. But I got that one mounted. That's a neat story. That's a good, bad, ugly gun muzzleloader Iowa buck. So if you haven't checked out that story, you'd probably understand why I got that deer mounted. So there is a neat story. I'll save it for that because there's a lot of other ones to go through here. I'm going to climb back here if this pool table doesn't. You'd think I'd have all these out on display, but I haven't figured out how I want to do that yet. So I'll just start handing them up here. That's probably one of the most meaningless deer that I actually have, because that is the only rack in this pile that was one that I hit with a vehicle. I tried to stop and I was only going like 5'10". I got the brakes slammed on and I was surprised. I was thinking he was just gonna get a little bump, and no, police had to come out and dispatch him. So this one, that's a neat one. That was shot before the videos. Really cool deal behind that. Shot that one on the dead run with a muzzleloader. And my cousin had just missed him, and he was screaming at me to shoot, but I knew that there was a giant that I had just seen like 20 minutes before with this one. And I was looking all over for it, and finally I was like, well, he's not anywhere around. And I pulled up and got lucky, and the ear was tucked back, and he instantly dropped and died and never wiggled. And he was about 100 yards out, but it was like a sand right around a pond. And he drops and never flinched. And I'm like, well, that was weird. We walked up there, we couldn't find a bullet hole on him for like 5 minutes, and here his ear was tucked back, and the muzzleloader bullet lodged perfectly in the hole and never came out the other side. And I still can't find like a lot of, it's hard to find the damage on it. Right there, the bullet stopped somewhere in there. That was, 05 on that one. This was an 05 deer. Neat deal on this. I'd been hunting some before I did all public and we did the videos. I grew up hunting a lot of public land swamp, but I had hunted some private ground in Buffalo County for a while. And this deer, I actually went up to North Dakota on a whim and never hunted the piece of public before, and he ended up chasing a doe like a few hundred yards away, and I rattled him down, and that was a tree stand deer, but kind of a neat, just real tight, palmated, kind of cool deer. This was actually shot that same year, so all 4 of those, I must have had them grouped together. You can see the dust is coming off as I'm picking them up, but anyway, well, no, that's why I don't like arrows that much. Nose is always flake out. So this deer is actually, I really like this deer. And now, not rack-wise maybe, but story-wise, same year, I was hunting that farm in Buffalo County, Wisconsin. Now this is no trophy for Buffalo County, Wisconsin. I had shot some really nice bucks there the past few years, but this one I saw chasing a doe, and he was on the neighbor's ground, and they were headed towards where I could hunt, and I V-lined as fast as I could and sprinted and got there just in time, like where I needed to be. The doe came right down into the creek and blew through the creek. He stopped in the creek. It was probably that deep of water, 1.5 feet, and he stopped to get a drink. I was already at full draw, and it blew through, and I actually reached over the bank and pulled the arrow out of the bank, and he had piled up right there. So it's just a really, it's like my least favorite style type of rack ever, thin little 8-pointer, but just cool story behind it. So this one here, I love this. This is a heavy, probably 4 or 5-year-old Wisconsin. This is, I got this one on video. That would have been dropping the hammer. That would have been back 10 years ago, 2011. Not much to it. We drove from Missouri through the day. We had a rough hunt. I think it was Missouri. Anyways, it was like a 6-7 hour drive. We left that morning because we had a tough hunt for a day and a half, and I was like, I'm sure we can pile up a couple of good bucks in a week if we spend our time. So we vacated that, drove all day, got to this spot, which I hadn't hunted since the year before, just a little bit, and just went in there. Didn't see much, and we were kind of actually walking out, and I was just kind of baby stepping as I was walking out. I mean, it was like last shooting hours kind of deal. And he walked up on us, and that was late pre-rut. So that was, I think, the 22nd of October, just a mature, massive 9-point. So this is actually the only buck that I've ever shot on the videos from a tree stand. That would have been our first year. That was in 07. And that first year video was a public and by permission video. This one I had just made friends with the farmer probably 3-4 years before, and there was other guys that could hunt that ground too. But I climbed up a silo, and that's actually on that first video now that I'm thinking about it, but climbed up a silo and I spotted him from that silo, and then the next night I went out there, hung the tree stand, and he come through. So kind of a neat deal, dried velvet on him. Okay, this deer right here, I just gotta make sure, okay, this is the one. So this is 2010. I drew an Iowa tag, and I went and hunted some public down there. And this deer is actually the deer that changed how I think when it comes to shooting a deer head on. at ground zero. Because I had him at like 20 yards, quarter into, he froze up, and this is on the regroup video. And I was at full draw for a while, waiting for him to just like turn, but he had us pegged too, and it's like, usually they're gonna, fly out of there. And my finger came off the trigger. I'd been holding it for a while, and I tried to ease it back onto the trigger just so I'm, that's where I'm ready to go. And just as it was coming down, it just came down a little too much. And my pin was right there, and it was a great blood trail, lethal kill, and I was hesitant on that shot because I had heard so many stories of not good results, but those are usually tree stand elevated, different angle type deals. So we've shot a ton of them on the ground facing us. That's my preferred way to do it now. After that, and then we started taking that shot, and that's my number one desirable shot. This one is another Beast 8. Public land. I drew a public land tag in Iowa. This is actually the first year I think I hunted Iowa with a bow. Yeah, it is. So drove through the night, got there, went in with tree stands. This was the first couple years of the videos, actually the first 3 seasons. We did some on the ground, some tree stand. We actually took the tree stands in about 2 miles. Went down these railroad tracks for a while, cut in, hung them. We were all sweaty. Got chilled after about an hour, climbed down, and we had jumped a big buck on a doe shortly before we hung those tree stands, and they went this direction, and I figured they was long gone, but they were not that far away, and we started still hunting through the woods and picked him up, and then it was 5 hours later and making a big loop and crept in there on him and played the whole thread and the needle with the satellite bucks. And yeah, that was a neat story. It took us like 11 or 12 hours or something like that crazy to get him out, but once we had him on the ground, I mean, that was not fun. So there's a reason I ain't went back to that spot. So let's see, what else do we got here? This was, so I took up the longbow in 2012, missed 4 good bucks, one being really big, 180 plus typical is what he was, 5x5. Anyway, so I didn't have a great start to hunting with the longbow, and then this season followed, and I shot 3, which those ones will be coming up here in a little bit. This one was cool. I rattled in some, I drew an Iowa tag. I was having a tough go for a few days. Went into this big timber, rattled. It was early morning, hour after light or whatever. Rattled in three bucks, and they come off the same ridge, and then they kind of like looped and kind of went back up that way, and I was like, I think there's a bigger buck up there, probably hung up with the doe, and those guys are satelliting, so we made a loop and got the wind right and how we wanted to approach it. And sure enough, this buck was up there with a doe. He was chasing satellite bucks, and there was like 3 different stalks. We lost him 3 different times in that woods, but it took like 8 hours before we finally got a shot. And I missed him the first shot. Got him the second though. So this is my very first longbow buck. Actually, also my smallest, but not that, who cares about that anyway. But yeah, that was, I was actually en route to a different buck, and this one just kind of happened to get in the way in my stock. And I self-filmed that one too. That was that same season, 2013. Yeah, I think it was like 13 or 15 yards or something. I was pretty jacked, especially after missing 4 the year before. And then this is the last one I shot that same season with the longbow. That was right after that one from Iowa. This was in Kansas. I shot him at like 7 yards from behind the decoy coming to kill me. And quarter and 2 shot on that one. Actually, I remember I never even resharpened the broadhead. I shot him with the same one as the Iowa buck, and it totally destroyed him. I love quarter and 2 shots too. So that one was pretty intense. Another yard or 2, and I might have been in a hospital or a casket. This was up until last year. This was the only mule deer. Well, it's the only mule deer hunting I ever did. I shot that one back in '04. not much to it. Montana, saw him out there, crawled to a spot, got the camera up, and he come through, and that was it. I thought he was a lot bigger, though, I'll tell you that. I thought that thing was a monster. This is my very first bow buck. I call him the coat hanger buck. He's got a nice little, you know, perfect. When my dad used to take me out hunting, we didn't use tree stands, but a lot of times he would point at a tree. Can you get up that tree? And so there was this, we went into this woods and there was a crotch up about 15 feet up there. And it wasn't much, you know, I was a lot smaller back then, but it was like an elm tree with a V-notch about like that and that. And he's like, can you get wedged up there? And I'm like, yeah, I can do that. And I climbed up there, you know, and got my 1 foot wedged in, and he come down off the ridge, and I only had a spot for 1 foot, so I had to wedge the 1 foot in, and the other foot sat on the other, and I pulled back with my Fleet Farm $80 bear bow and the plastic wheels and all that, and that's that buck. So I guess this one right here, I haven't built a pedestal for him yet, but this one I shot in 2014. Pretty neat velvet buck. We come into a new area we'd never hunted before. This was in Wyoming. And got eyes on this buck right away. Like, holy crap. Like, you see something like this in velvet and never been there before. It's, you know, pretty neat. So we put a stalk on him, and he kind of pulled the disappearing act. The next day, didn't spot him in the morning, and then midday, there was a big hill, like a foothill, probably a half mile away from where he was at. So we just climbed up on this foothill and sat there for 2-3 hours watching and glassing, and all of a sudden he popped like 500-600 yards or better out. And that gave us the visual. He rebedded, we crept in there on him, and we were at about 40-50 yards, and he got up to go feed just for like a little snack, like a 5-minute snackaroo. Then he was gonna come back in bed, and something freaked out of doe or a fawn that was nearby him, and she come running right to us, and we weren't where we wanted to be yet. We were in like really short grass, probably that tall, pretty sparse, on our butts. But we were sitting on our butts, my legs were kicked out like this, and the grass was so short. As he's running, I leaned back in what I got for grass just to stay hidden, and he come trotting in. And the second he stopped, I knew he was gonna like turn his head once and just peg us, even though I was done like this. So as soon as just as he was coming to a halt, I just came up with the longbow and 3/4 draw shot him. So that's how that one came to be. He was probably, I don't know, 15 or 17 yards. That's on Brazen Resilience video. Actually, I think it's right here. Yeah, right here, that one. This is, not much to this one, just a big muley that I found dead. I was elk hunting and walking through the timber in Colorado. This one, I said that other mule deer was the only mule deer that I've ever shot other than this one I shot last year. It was the last day. My tag was good for whitetail or a muley. And I had a little pocket where I felt I could get on a muley. And in about 20 minutes, it all went down. So I guess these are pretty rare. I think they call them trips or something. I don't know much about muley. Anyways, and this one right here, this is probably the one that is most people, I guess, would know about if they've watched the videos, and that's one I shot in 2015. Really epic story behind this one. Like pretty much almost all these deer, we didn't know about them. Rolled into Kansas on day 2, I think it was. In the morning, we got a glimpse of this deer, but he was a long ways from public and going on to private even further. And then we just kind of like, we know that you can't get hung up on a deer if you want to actually get one, you know, in the public land world anyways. So it's like, man, hopefully he ends up on public, you know, and we get a crack at him, but we better not get too invested. I mean, we'll keep our eyes out, and we're actually having a really tough hunt. We didn't have one stalk in 5 days. And out there in the plains, we drive around until we get our visual and then move, because the grass is this short and you can see everything, and there's no point in usually going and just sitting out there. So after 5 days of struggle, we got on Chancey and I, we got on a big buck, and I was filming. He missed that deer and well, hit him in the ear, droopy. So didn't get him, and then I think it was, yeah, the next day we got back on that deer. Again, close but didn't get him. And then he said, all right, I'm gonna run the camera, your turn or whatever. And we went out that night and we were coming up this one road, and all of a sudden I pegged this guy like 3/4 of a mile back in this public in the grass. And it was right on the edge of the line, but he was on the public side. And by the time we got back there, he just disappeared, which obviously he got on the private in this patch of timber back in there. And then it was 2 days later, we happened to be coming up a road, and there he was. He was 2 miles from there, or 2.5 miles or something like that from there. And there he was with the doe, and he was half mile from public. And he ran out there. Out there, if you're, I mean, he was 300 yards from the road. They're running at 300 yards. So they ran out into the private a ways. We kept the vehicle going, didn't stop, and turned around, and then we had to drive a mile back to get on the far edge of the public and hoped that he would cross the line. So we got where we thought we needed to be, and after 8 hours from the time we seen him, he crossed the line. His doe pegged me kind of in the midst of it. She was about 40, 50 yards out. And I think he thought that I was maybe another buck or something, like, because there was this old broken down round bale. And I think he thought that by reading her demeanor, that's what was going on. And he V-lined right into like 15 yards on a trot. And as he's trotting, he's coming by and he sees that, no, wrong. And he's trotting, so I had to take a trotting shot, did not make a good shot. And it was like a 4-day chase with this thing, which 3 of those days I didn't see him. So no blood, obviously. Very non-vital hit, but just enough that it all came together. So pretty crazy deal. That's my biggest. And also my coolest story. I mean, just the way, it's all on video, Defiance. Just the way it all came together. That's actually, you guys just did one with Sam. So Sam's canoe buck is also on that. So that happened shortly after Sam got that one. Anyways, it was a pretty epic story. I guess I didn't really talk about that one. Forgot him. That's the one I shot the year after that one. Pretty neat deal. We played games with that one. I had him at 2.5 yards one day, but I got caught on my back. He come walking. I snuck into 13 with him and his doe. No shot, and I was laying there for a good hour on my belly in a spot where maybe I could come up once he stood. And then I started to get sore because I needed to keep my head like this on the ground, and then I started to get tired like that. So I got on my back thinking it'd be another hour or two and then I'll shift to the, like that. So I was on my back and he got up and just happened to like come walking right towards me when there was nothing I could do. So he come at 2.5 yards and then cut my wind, my scent. So, and then 2 days later, or 3 days later, I caught him back out in that square, it was a square mile of grass. Caught him back out there, crawled in there. There's a couple of satellite bucks, and then he was running them off the whole time we were crawling. We crawled for probably 500-600 yards on our hands and knees. I mean, there was no crouching, in fact, we didn't really get much for footage of him because it was so tough to do right through there. And we got into like 30 yards, 40 yards on him. We had a little tiny POV camera on top of our big camera, and we didn't have any tape on it. It's a white one. And I think he saw, like through the blades of grass, I think he caught a shine. And I think he thought it was a tine. And I gotta go run another satellite buck off. And because all of a sudden he just V-lined like right to us, like ready to murder us, and we didn't have a decoy out, so that's the only thing so I shot him at 7 yards, 1/4 coming to murder us, basically. So yeah, pretty cool deal on that one. That one is just one that I shot the year before the videos. Actually, 2 years before the videos, 05. Real neat buck, Wisconsin. 13 below, I missed him with a muzzleloader a few days before, 5 days before probably. But yeah, just cool, just these little end droppies, which I just don't have luck even finding a drop tine ever, it seems. But not much to that other than 13 below Wisconsin, missed him, and I don't have it on video for you. So, but yeah, quite a few of these are in the video series. whitetailadrenaline.com, right on our website, we got the DVDs. And then We got a lot of retailers too on our website, Shields and quite a few other like bow shops and sports shops. When shows are going on, we do some shows too. Those are the three kind of ways. And then we're working on digital. Resurgence is actually going to be out on digital next month. So that's last year's. So, and then this year we'll be doing digital too. So, and guess what? You'll get to watch it in 4K finally. Not standard F DVD 1990s, right?